And
oh, good. It's being recorded. That's good.
well, we need proof, right? Otherwise, they might not believe you, Jane.
Okay.
We're going to do some spine stuff for the most part. We'll go through a couple different things for it, and then we'll do just like some super basic hips and shoulders, but put a tiny spin on it. And that'll be that. I'll leave you guys off mute because I feel like that's been going pretty well lately. So call out if you feel like you're noticing something kind of odd, or if you want just a little bit more information about what's happening. And outside of that, if you have a couple of yoga blocks, that would be cool. You can definitely use them. And like a little pillow could be fine as well. Like a little couch cushion or whatever. None of this stuff is necessary though. We can still do all of our work without it. It's just a means of enhancing what's happening. So working on some spine stuff, we're gonna start out with 2 minutes. I'm gonna put on the clock and we're gonna do our segmental cat camels for 2 minutes. When we do this, I'm just getting a timer going here. When we do this, keep in mind, we're gonna go to tabletop position. If you wanna have your hands, maybe I'll step back just a little bit. If you wanna have your hands just in front of the line of your shoulders rather than right underneath of them, that could be helpful if you find your wrists get a little bit sore when you're normally in that tabletop, and otherwise your hips are on top of your knees. You could even put that yoga block between your knees and squeeze it just to help get a little bit more of that contractile effort through the hips going into your spine to move it. So here we go. Timer set. We're going to start out at the bottom end. So we're going to roll the tail between our legs, lower back rounds, mid back starts to round, upper back starts to round, and we'll bring our neck into it. We'll curl our chin towards our chest so even the neck is rounded. Keeping everything rounded, we'll take the tail out from between the legs. Low back starts to round or arch. Mid back starts arching. Upper back starts arching. Lift the Adam's apple, then the chin, and then the gaze. Hold everything in extension or an arch, and then again, starting at the hips, tail between legs, low back rounding, mid back rounding, upper back rounding, chin is tucking. Same time that everything is rounding and extending, think about trying to get some length happening at the same time. So just like a boxer wrapping his gloves around his wrists or hers, not only are they wrapping, but they're also pulling to get more surface area being used. And again, going back to everything rounding, you can just keep doing this on your own time. Don't worry if you've fallen out of sync with me. Remember, we're trying to move one segment at a time. One more time, we'll go through everything arching. Cool. And then you can let everything kind of relax there. So next thing that we're going to do is we'll start kind of isolating the lower body and then the upper body. So we're going to do some rotations through our legs like windshield wipers. And as we do these, that's going to help, that's going to be working just the hips and the lower back. But I want you to make sure as you're doing these rotations, try not to let your butt cheeks lift off of the ground. So if you have a little pillow, you could put it behind your head to rest on it. I'm going to kind of go on an angle here. Arms are out at your sides, and we'll just flip palms to face down. So as I drop myself back, pillow right underneath my head. You don't need it. You don't need the block either. If you don't have a block, just squeeze your knees together. Hands out to the sides. And again, we'll set a timer. We're just going to work for a couple minutes. So we'll drop the knees out side to side. As the knees are going out sideways, try not to let one knee slide behind the other. So that's where having that block to squeeze can be helpful, or keeping your knees squeezed together. So try to keep the knees in line with each other as they go side to side. Your palms are flipped upside down. And as you go to one side, so as I'm dropping to the left, I feel a stretch coming on through my right chest. And that's kind of my cue, or part of my cueing, to come back up. Now I drop my knees to the right, and I start to feel a stretch through the left side of my chest. And I come back up. I'm only going as far to one side or the other as I can, without letting that stretch move much past the line of my lower ribs. Your hip can come up off of the floor. Sorry, I think I said not to do that. Your hip can come up off of the floor, but just try to be mindful that you're not feeling your lower back wanting to start arching. So try to stay relatively hollow or relatively rounded through the lower back as you go side to side. If you're not staying hollow through the low back as you're moving side to side, you may start to find you get something of a pinching sensation through the back side, kind of in that space between your hips and your spine. Everybody's doing okay?
Yep.
Cool. You could always take the feet off of the floor and do your reps with feet off of the ground, but you'll notice that that suddenly makes this way harder on the abs. So you decide if you have enough strength and body awareness to control that. And then you could even go with straight legs if that's super easy. And you'll notice with straight legs, with straight legs, that then that lever is even longer. And so controlling with the abs gets even more challenging. So there's just some ways of taking that same drill and shifting it from being like something that's rehabilitative into something that's about getting more rotation through the spine, into something that also becomes like a strength challenge. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. The next thing that we'll do is we're going to do some big windmills. So we'll get some shoulder stuff going on. Actually, sorry, I wanted to do this short lever. So maybe I'll face sideways. Maybe that's the best view for you guys. Again, with that block, you could put it between the knees if you like, and just make sure when you rotate into the stretch, your knee is going to want to come with you. So as I open up towards the right, I want to reach my right knee to the left so I can get some torsion built through my spine. So I'm kind of trying to wring my spine out. What I want you guys to do is I want you to just bend your elbow so your thumb is touching your shoulder, and you're going to rotate from just a shorter lever. So it's just like what we did with the feet. Knees are in line with the hips. Keep your stomach hollow. This is another one. We're just opening and closing. This is another one where you may find that if you're not being mindful of keeping the stomach hollow as you rotate open, and especially as you're reaching that knee in the opposite direction, you get a little bit of irritation in the low back, and same area in that space between the low back and the hips. I'm just going slow, not moving particularly fast. Okay, and then other side. So the other thing to keep in mind is just listening to what's happening with your shoulder. So trying to keep your shoulder down and back as you're moving. If you try to kind of get some outward rotation with the shoulder depressing, you might find that that starts to bring that force back up into your spine again, or into your upper back. And the other thing that I want you to try and be mindful of is that, try not to use your shoulder as something to pull and reach with, but instead focus on your spine as being the mover. So as I set myself up here, I'll bend my arm again. I'll place my thumb on my shoulder, so it's like a front rack position. Stomach is hollowed out, and I'm trying to reach my top knee almost in front of the line of the bottom one, so I'm creating like a cliff. And as I rotate open, I'm really going to try to make that come from the muscles on either side of my spine and not the shoulder blades. Same thing when I close up. We'll go side to side, opening and closing. And we can be exhaling while we open, inhaling while we close. If you want to try to bring breath into this, is always helpful. So I'm exhaling mouth, I close, I inhale nose. I open, exhaling mouth. I close, inhale nose. You can kind of just let your neck do whatever. I find that having a pillow underneath your head is not always the best, because when you're lying on your side, it keeps your neck from side bending, but as you wrap open, it ends up kind of compressing your neck, your chin to your chest. So if you're finding that pillow is a distraction, ditch it. If you do find that it helps your neck, you can always add it in. Okay, so going into our hips and our shoulders, we're going to go back to our tabletop position. And what I want us to do is just get a couple of reps in of hip circles and shoulder circles, but we'll just put a little spin on it. So we'll start out with the hips, and I'll just face sideways here. What I want you to do in your tabletop position is I want you to get everything rounded from your neck right through to your hips. And try to keep everything rounded the whole time. We're going to do our hip circles. So we'll pull the knee backwards, pull the knee sideways, pull the knee in front of us, and tuck it underneath the line of the hip. And then rewind. Pull the knee in front of you, pull it sideways, pull it backwards, and under. We'll do 2 more reps just like that. Try to keep that stomach rounding the whole time. Forwards and reverse. And one more time, reverse. Good, and notice how that just kind of changes the sensations. So the back side of the circle is a little bit harder. You might feel kind of short-changed. The front side of the circle might feel a little bit easier. Come front side, backwards behind me. Recheck your spine as everything's still round. Pull the leg backwards, sideways and in front. Pull the leg in front, sideways and back. I've lost a lot of my rounding. I've got to reclaim it. Pull it back, sideways and up. Pull it up, sideways and back. We'll give muscles front side of our torso a little break. And we're going to go into extension now. So now we're going to do an arch. And we'll go back to the right leg. Same thing again, 3 circles. We'll pull the leg backwards, sideways and forwards. Trying to maintain an arch through the full spine. Knee up, sideways and back. Knee back, sideways and up. Knee up, sideways and back. One more time. And just notice, do you feel differences in what's happening in your hip joint where your leg is meeting your hip? And do you notice differences in your spine at all? Do you feel some of that force sending itself through certain parts of your spine more than when your spine is in a neutral position, other leg? And then also, do you notice how between being rounded through the spine or holding an arch through the spine, it's facilitating different angles of that big circle? So now you might find when your spine is arched, it's easier to pick your knee up, but it's harder to bring it under the chest line. Cool. So same thing again, and we'll just do it with the shoulders. I'm just gonna face forward because I don't have a lot of space. So we're doing our great big shoulder circle. We're going to round everything in our spine. So from the hips right through to the neck, try to keep everything rounded. Reach your arm overhead, pull it up and to the side, lift it to the ceiling behind you, let it come down and reverse it. Lift it up behind you, reach it sideways, pull it to the ceiling as you reach overhead, and it comes down. And again, try to keep everything rounded. Check back in with the hips. Are they staying rounded? Mid-back staying rounded. Upper back and neck staying rounded. One more rep, lifting arm up overhead, reaching it sideways, pulling it high, letting it down, reaching it high behind, rotating to the side, comes forward and down. And same thing as before, what I was talking about with the hips, you might notice that the leverage of your arm moving changes the way force feels moving through your spine, particularly your neck and your upper back. And you might also notice the different angles of that big arm circle are easier and more challenging in certain ranges of motion. One more rep. It's really hard for me to talk and keep my spine rounded, or talk and keep my spine arched. So then now we'll arch everything. Low back, right through mid, upper back and neck, all arching. Arm lifts up, reaches backwards, reaches high, comes down. Arm reaches backwards and high, sideways and overhead. Try to connect to those muscles through each side of the length of your spine, from your head right through to your hips, and squeezing to hold you in position. And then other arm reaches up, sideways, high and behind, comes down, reaches high behind, sideways, overhead and down. Last rep. Cool. We did it. Mini mobility routine complete. Everybody's feeling good?
Yep, it was good.
Questions about that stuff?
Nope, it was great.
Observations?
All good.
It's easier to do the arm circles when you're not tight for me. When you're
arched or when you're rounded?
When you're arched.
You found it a lot easier.
Yeah.
Yeah, so extension or like a back bend. So this shape facilitates your shoulder blade moving down, which facilitates that reaching overhead. So something to really understand, when you're pressing an object overhead, if you are, gotta move backwards here a little bit. If you're lifting through the chest and upper back, that's not a bad thing at all. And again, mechanically, it's complementary to what the shoulder blade needs to do in order to facilitate arm going overhead. But if you're arching through the low back only, and you don't have a lot of movement through the upper back, then that's where the mechanics are changing. Your shoulder's not able to pull down and back as much, and you're just driving a lot of potentially unnecessary or unfavorable tension into the low back. So those sorts of details are really important to understand, and especially for us as coaches in terms of telling somebody or critiquing their movement is it's not necessarily a bad thing to have a back bend going on while you're pressing. We just need to understand where it's coming from and how it contributes to something beneficial. Cool?
Mhm. Interesting.
Anything else?
No, I'm hungry.
Me too. Me too. I'm about to go.
About that.
What's that?
And I know there's nothing you can do about that.
I'm sorry. No, I can't. I'll send you a virtual sandwich if I could.
All right.
Well, you guys did a really good job. It was nice to see you. I'll look forward to seeing you again on Monday at 7 p.m., but enjoy your weekends in the meantime.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Danny.
You too, Danny.
Bye, guys.
Bye.